friends, happy Thursday. Welcome back to Cook with Kris. Today we are going to be making a delicious plant-based Moroccan cuisine. This is a great weeknight recipe with ingredients that you will likely be really familiar with. And so I'm gonna go ahead and jump right in, share with you the ingredients that you're gonna need. And as always, after I go ahead and I cook this with you guys, I always post the recipe to stories as long as I'm doing a recipe rather than just like a cooking method, but that's what we're doing all month long. We are cooking around the world, and we are starting in North Africa today, and we are cooking a not entirely traditional, but we've got the same kind of essence of Moroccan cuisine with all of the different spice blends and the juxtaposition between some sweet and some savory, and it's all gonna come together in a really delicious plant-based dish. So I'm so excited to share it with you guys. All right, what are we gonna need for this? I'm gonna go ahead and share with you what we need. We're gonna get our mise en place started, so we're gonna get everything in its place, and then I'm gonna start cooking. So first and foremost, tagines are classically made in, if you've ever actually seen a tagine before, a ceramic pot called a tagine. A tagine is a Moroccan stew or a braise. It can be made with meat. It's very often made with meat. It can also be made plant-based. It's often served over some sort of a grain, like couscous, which is actually technically pasta. I'm gonna be using quinoa today. It's gonna make it gluten-free, or alongside a flatbread. So I am gonna be making some orange quinoa, but it's not necessarily part of the actual tagine today. So I'm gonna be making an orange quinoa, and so I'm gonna use just some quinoa. This is the sprouted quinoa, but you can use whatever quinoa you've got. You could also use couscous. The cooking method's just gonna be a little bit different, so follow the directions on your couscous package. I'm using a rice cooker for the quinoa because honestly, I don't have time to fuss on the stove over there because I'm working over here with the braise. So I've got some quinoa. And to take this up a notch and to really complement the tagine that we're making, the reason I'm telling you about what I'm serving it on is I'm going to use half orange juice and half water. So this is going to make the quinoa. Quinoa can be a little bit bitter. If you don't have a pre-rinsed quinoa, it is important to wash the quinoa because it can be a little bit bitter. But even if you've washed your quinoa, it can sometimes have a little bit of bitterness to it. And the orange juice with the sweetness and the acidity really cuts through that. And it complements the delicious kind of sweet and savory tagine really, really well. So like I said, this is a plant-based tagine. So the protein that we're using today, instead of using a meat, which is oftentimes traditional, is chickpeas. So I've got some garbanzo beans here. You can use canned and rinsed, and I'm making a mess as usual. If you've ever been around here, you know I like to make a mess in the kitchen. So you can use canned and rinsed, or you can make your own. I usually use the Instant Pot. I'm gonna leave those over there so I don't continue to make a mess of my kitchen. You're gonna need some sort of an onion. I'm just using a yellow onion here. So a chopped onion, and again, we're gonna prep all of this together. You're gonna need one good sized carrot. You're gonna need at least one clove of garlic. This is like a giant head of garlic, so I'm probably just gonna use one, but you could use 2 cloves of garlic as well. I like adding cauliflower to this. This is optional. You don't need cauliflower in this if you don't want to, if you just want to stick to the chickpeas. But I love adding some extra veggies and just the texture that cauliflower adds. So this is a giant head of cauliflower. Normally I would use a whole head, but I'm just going to use about half of this today. You're going to need some fresh herbs. So one of my favorite parts of Moroccan style cuisine is the juxtaposition between sweet and savory, and also the freshness that adding things like fruit and herbs add to it. So we're gonna have all of those components in our tagine today. So this is some parsley. So I've got some Italian parsley and then a little bit of leftover cilantro. We're gonna use both together. We're gonna use some at the beginning or in the middle while we're cooking, and then we're gonna add some more at the end. You're also going to need a Moroccan spice blend. So the blend that I love to use is going to be within the directions that I'm going to share in my stories after. But the basic components of this are cinnamon, coriander, cumin, which I buy in bulk because those of you who have been following at any point know that cumin's my favorite, ginger, ground ginger, a little bit of allspice, a little bit of paprika, some ground cloves. I like to grind my own spices when I can because it's just so much better when they're fresh. Some turmeric, or if you do not have all of these spices on hand and you do not want to use a Moroccan spice blend, you could just go and get some Ras El Hanout. Okay, I'm sorry if I'm butchering that name, but this is a Moroccan style spice blend or a Middle Eastern style spice blend, and it works just the same. It's really, really delicious. And if you want to get extra fancy, this is not a requirement at all because I know they cost about $1 million, but if you happen to have any saffron on hand, you guys, saffron comes in these little, usually comes in a larger jar and in these little tiny little capsules. I know. It's actually, I'm not sure if they're a part of the flour, and they add a really, really delicious and unique flavor. So if you do happen to have saffron, go ahead and we're gonna add a little bit of saffron in along. You only need a tiny bit and it makes a big difference with our tagine. So we have our onion, we've got our garlic, we've got our carrot, we've got our cauliflower, we've got our herbs, we've got our spice blend. We are also going to go ahead and add in some fruit. So some dried fruit is usually traditional in many tagines. It adds a little bit of that sweetness with the savory of the spices as well as whatever sort of protein you're using. So I'm gonna use some dates, and I'm just gonna chop up some dates, about a 1/4 cup. And then I'm also going to use some golden raisins. These are also called sultanas. You could use the dried apricots as well, work really well for this too. You could use regular raisins, totally up to you, but I like having a couple different options, or you could just use one. Another option, but not necessary, I do like adding some olives at the end. I love the brininess along with the sweetness of the dried fruit and the savory of the herbs, of the spices is what I meant to say. You don't have to. So if you can totally leave the olives out, but I do like adding some olives at the end as well. To cook in, we're just gonna use some olive oil, and I like doing half olive oil, half butter. If you want this entirely plant-based, you could use a vegan butter or just use olive oil, but I do like the combination. And I was just talking to a friend the other day. The reason why a lot of chefs use half olive oil and half butter is because it actually increases the smoke point of the butter. So that's kind of like if you're using ghee. Ghee is clarified butter. Butter has some milk solids in it, which is why it burns so quickly. But if you add oil and butter together, it doesn't burn as quickly. And you just need some sort of a veggie stock too. I have a little bit of chicken stock left, so purists, I'm sorry, I'm using a little bit of chicken stock. You need about a cup. You're gonna add as needed. So some sort of a veggie broth or stock that you've got on hand. And then salt, of course. You guys know I love my real salt. Kosher salt's great too. So that is what we need. I know it seems like a lot of ingredients. Oh, and a topper, real quick. I'm gonna show you guys how to toast almonds in just a couple minutes, but I'm just using some slivered almonds and I'm gonna toast them up in the pan. These are the absolute best topping for this. It adds a little bit of crunch. And remember, when we talk about the different flavor foundations, okay, it's taste, texture, and temperature. Adding some texture with the almonds on top just takes it up a notch, because traditionally, any sort of braises like a tagine, they all tend to be like kind of the same texture. And so when you can add a little bit of a different texture to it, a contrasting texture, it really adds some extra mouthfeel and really makes it extra satisfying. So I love adding that. Okay, so let's go ahead and let's do our mise en place together. I'm gonna start by getting my quinoa going over here. So for quinoa in the rice cooker, it's just a 1-to-2 ratio. So I'm gonna grab my rice cooker over here. And I know you guys probably don't need instruction on how to cook quinoa, but again, rinse it if it's not pre-rinsed. This one happens to be pre-rinsed. I'm gonna go like this. And I'm just gonna do a cup of quinoa, and I'm gonna do half orange juice and half water. You could do all orange juice if you wanted to, but I find it a bit sweet if you use all orange juice, so I am just going ahead. This is 1 cup. I don't need to measure it again. I do need to measure my orange juice. So we're gonna go ahead and just get that started. So one of my favorite tips for meal prepping or cooking in the kitchen is to always get the thing that is going to take the longest ready first. Now, in this case, the quinoa is probably gonna take up most of the time that I am going to be prepping. If I were at home, I would probably, and like actually cooking this for dinner, this is gonna be my dinner, but if I were cooking this around dinner time, I could probably get away with doing the prep and getting the tagine on, because the quinoa only takes like 15 to 20 minutes once it's on. But today I wanna make sure I have it ready by the time everything is done. So we're starting with that. All right, let's go ahead and do our mise en place together. had a little bit of a crazy morning, so I don't have things prepped ahead. So let's just go ahead and let's talk a little bit about tagines while I go ahead and just chop up some onion. Again, these are like, I've got some really big ingredients today. I've got like a big onion and a big old head of cauliflower, and so I'm probably not gonna use the whole amount just because I don't need like 15 pounds of tagine. But like I mentioned before, tagine is actually the word for the actual pot that's used to cook. You guys, it's really hard to not talk with my hands while I'm while I'm getting my stuff ready. This is why I usually have all of my veggies ready, but it's fun to chat with you guys while I do this. So the tagine is both the term for, I gotta find my root. All right. It's both the term for the actual pot that's used as well as the actual braise. You can make a tagine, which really just either means the pot. And the thing about the pot, let me talk about the actual tagine pot because I don't have one. I have a Dutch oven and it works in just the same way. So a tagine is a ceramic pot. You might have seen them before. There's a bottom, and then there's a top that's kind of like a conical shape, and there's a little bit of a hole at the top. And the purpose of this is that it's really great for braising because it kind of steams whatever you're cooking. It's almost like a slow cooker. Most of the time, a lot of people will just add the ingredients in raw and just kind of let it all cook and simmer together. I want this to happen a little bit faster because most of us just don't have the time to, on a weeknight, unless you are actually putting this in the slow cooker, which I have not tried, but you absolutely could. Most of us do not have the time to do that. So I'm gonna show you how to make this on a weeknight. This is a really big onion, you guys. All right. And we're gonna try not to cry over our onion. What was it, a few weeks ago, I was talking to you guys about how to chop an onion, and I started tearing up. It's just such an emotional process. I'm just kidding. When your onion is older, and sometimes larger because it takes longer to chop, there's a better likelihood that you'll start tearing up. But like me, oh my gosh, you guys. There are so many secrets. My sister was just telling me that there are like TikTok secrets to onions and what's going to keep you from crying over your onions. And like, honestly, you guys, yes, the bowl of water does work sometimes. But it's just because it is absorbing I'm trying to find my peeler over here. I've got lots of things in front of me. It's just absorbing those aromatic compounds from the onion. You know what? I gotta go wipe my eyes. Give me a second. Okay. Okay, brief interlude, and we are back. All right, so my mom, you guys, you know how I've talked about my peelers and how much I love my Y-shaped peelers, and that my mom did not have a Y-shaped peeler. Now my mom has a Y-shaped peeler, and I am so proud of her because it makes such a difference when you're peeling. From someone who worked at a vegan soup company where we would peel for literally hours on end. It is so helpful to have a good peeler. All right, I think I've gotten myself together at this point. Let's chop our carrot. So all I'm doing right now, you guys, this is nothing that you don't know how to do or that you can't do on your own. I'm just chopping up the onion. I'm just dicing the onion. The goal whenever you're chopping is always just to A, be safe, and to B, just cut things in a uniform way. This is a braise, so it really does not, these do not have to be perfect. And I will never expect perfection from you guys in the kitchen because most of us are busy mamas or busy professionals and we just want to get dinner on the table. But it will help if your ingredients are the right size or a similar size. So I'm actually going to put this with my prepped onion because I'm going to put them all in at the same time. So I've got one medium carrot, lots of onion. I did say I was going to do half and then I did the whole thing. You know what? It is what it is. It's cool because we're in the kitchen and we can experiment and we can do things our way. We're not looking for perfection, right? That's why I'm not a baker, because I am a perfectionist in so many other areas, this is not one where I need to be a perfectionist. All right, I've got my garlic here. So funny enough, an old onion is going to make you cry faster, like my onion, and a piece of fresh garlic is going to be harder to peel. So I'm just peeling my garlic. We're just hanging out here. So I was talking about tagine. So the tagine is both the pot as well as the actual braise. And like I said, you can use any sort of protein you want. So if you want to make this same recipe and instead of chickpeas, microplane for the garlic, instead of chickpeas, you want to use chicken, what you're going to do is you're just going to cook the onions and the carrots and the garlic, just like I'm going to show you. You're going to, I would actually wait on the garlic. So you're going to cook the onions and the carrots. You're going to remove them from the pot. You're going to go ahead and cook your meat. Then you're going to add the carrots and the onions back in. And then I'll add all of those delicious spices to toast. So that would be my recommendation if you want to use a meat instead, or just keep it nice and planty. All right, so we've got a giant clove of garlic. Typically I use 2, but that's a giant one. I'm gonna go ahead and chop up the cauliflower over here, and then we will go ahead and start cooking. But the reason we are doing our mise en place, okay, if you guys haven't been around here for very long, mise en place means everything in its place. It's a French term, and it is literally the chef's secret to getting things done in the kitchen efficiently. Because obviously you guys are listening to me just kind of chat with you guys today. But especially if you're doing this ahead of time in like kind of an ingredient prep, meal prep, where you're just kind of getting this stuff done, sticking it in your fridge, your dinners are gonna come together so much faster. And any dish that you cook is going to come together so much faster if you have the ingredients ready to go to just put in the pot. You're gonna see how fast this comes together once I have actually just gone ahead and I've gotten everything all cut and everything all ready, instead of having to cut and cook and cut and cook, okay? I want you guys to feel like cooking is easy and to be confident in the kitchen, and when you're trying to do 10 things at once, it can feel really stressful. And let's take the stress, none of us need extra stress, and you are way more likely to cook and to enjoy it if it's not stressful. And so we're gonna take away the burden of feeling like you need to do 10 things at once by mise en placing and doing one thing and then getting cooking. Okay, so I'm gonna put this aside because I do not need this much. This is a lot of cauliflower. Okay. Boom. Oh, my oldest daughter is 7. And so she is currently, this is an aside, but because we're all friends here, she is now at the age where she is embarrassed by the things mommy says. So I grew up in New England. For those of you who don't know, I'm East Coast girl through and through, and I grew up in a little kind of surf town, this like tiny on the coast. It's a beach town. We have, one of the most popular beaches in my state, and the town, not the town I live in now, but the town I grew up in. The town I live in now is actually is right next to one of the most famous spots, vacation spots on the East Coast. So I grew up in this little like beach town, and I don't know, I thought it was normal to say things like dude, and like the turtles in Finding Nemo. I thought it was normal to talk like that. And I mean, I didn't really have that like kind of California accent. I don't know. But I definitely thought it was normal to say things like that, like dude and stoked, and like I said things like that in high school and thought it was very normal. And so I still say things like that because I'm old, and apparently I've stopped developing new phrases. I said that hits different to my assistant last week, and she laughed at me because she was like, that was a very Gen Z thing to say. It was. I'm not. I am 31. And so anyway, now when I say things that she finds a little bit embarrassing, she's like, Mommy, do you have to say it that way? I don't know another way to say it, kiddo. I don't. This is the way I say things. All right, I hope you guys enjoyed my TED Talk. On to some actual cooking. What I'm gonna go ahead and do, it's really important when you're cooking, you guys, to keep your cutting board clean, because you're way less likely to cut yourself when you have a clear space. The only other thing I am gonna do real quick, I'm just going to rinse off my knife. And I am going, whoops, that's not safe. We'll fix that. I'm gonna chop up some herbs, okay? So I'm just gonna get a big old bunch of herbs. I've got some parsley. I don't mind if there's a little parsley stem in there. You don't want a ton of parsley stem. But again, we're making things easier in the kitchen, and these are washed, by the way. And I'm gonna grab some cilantro, and you could measure these out. You're gonna want about 2 tablespoons each, and you're gonna want 1 to 2 tablespoons at the beginning of cooking, and you're gonna want to save 1 to 2 tablespoons after, depending on how much you love fresh herbs. For me, I love fresh herbs. By the way, this is the easiest way to chop fresh herbs. Bunch them all together, chop one way, and then you're gonna grab the end of the knife. We're just gonna chop. So the combination of the cilantro and the parsley is really delicious, and I love adding a little bit at the beginning so those flavors get infused within the dish, and then a little bit at the end to add a little bit of freshness. So we're gonna reserve half. Now, if you don't like the fresh herbs, you can add it all in at the end, or you can leave it out, but I don't recommend it. All right, just chopping these up nice and good. I'm gonna get these ready, and then we're going to start to cook. So while I finish chopping these up, in order to cook, we are gonna go ahead and get either our traditional tagine, if you happen to have one of those in your house. That's all. Please send me a picture. If you have a tagine in your house, please send me a picture. They're so beautiful. I'm gonna use, again, my Dutch oven, but you could use just a regular old sauce pot. That works great too. Whatever you've got. The Dutch oven works really well because the Dutch oven holds heat really well, and it works really well for a braise. Now, this is a quick braise. I was talking about meat earlier. This is a quick braise because it is a plant-based dish. If you were using a meat, then yes, this would take longer. And honestly, the longer the better with this dish. The longer you have to let this just simmer away with the cover on and let all the flavors infuse, the better. Anything really heavily spiced, the longer you can keep those spices in, especially with the protein, the more those flavors are going to infuse together. This is definitely one of those dishes that is going to be 100 times better the next day. Like, if you could keep this on overnight, it would be amazing, which is why I highly recommend somebody goes out there and tries to make this in the slow cooker, because I pretty much guarantee it's gonna be really good. Okay, let's clean up our workspace, because it's important to have a clean workspace. So I'm gonna move this away. I just put my pot on medium-high, okay? I'm gonna gather all of my ingredients. You can't see my mess, but I can, and I'm gonna clean it up. I'm gonna grab our chickpeas over here. So, all right, what do we have? We've got our chickpeas, our onion and our carrots. We've got our garlic. We've got our spice blend. We've got our cauliflower, which is optional. I cut my cauliflower into kind of big pieces. I'm gonna break some of these up a little bit because you guys, you know this. This is a common fact. You guys know. But if you want something to cook faster, cut it smaller. Okay, just a reminder. It's gonna cook faster if it's smaller, and things are going to cook more evenly, and it's gonna have a better mouthfeel if they are all the same size, or as close to the same size as possible. I've mentioned salads before in this instance. I know we're talking about a tagine today, but one of the things that makes, there goes my quinoa, one of the things that makes restaurant salads either appealing or not is when whoever makes the salad actually chops things to the same size. Having like a giant tomato or a giant, have you ever had a salad where they give you like the entire piece of pepper? Like they just like slice the entire pepper. That is not appealing. But it is actually really appealing to our taste buds when we consume things that are the same size. Okay, all right. I've got my cauli, I've got my herbs. We're good to go. Okay, so I just turned my pan on medium-high. Now that it's, oops. All right. Now that it's getting hot, I'm going to add half butter, half oil, right? We're gonna increase the smoke point of that butter by adding in the oil, about a tablespoon. And my screen keeps I move around a lot. This is what I realized, that my screen, Instagram is like, are you still here? I am here. I'm just doing the kitchen dance. Okay. And I'm going to use this much butter. I want you guys to be comfortable cooking with recipes and also comfortable cooking without them. So the reason why I share with you all the ingredients and kind of give you a brief overview of the steps that I am going to cook, or that I'm going to take before I start to cook, is because I want to teach you guys the skills of learning how to read a recipe and how to actually cook in the right order. So it is important that we gather all our ingredients first, do our mise en place before we start cooking. And it's also important to know what's coming, to know what's ahead, right? You wouldn't just set off on a trip. Like you would, okay, if you're getting on an airplane, all right, and you are expecting to get to a destination, if that pilot were to pop on the intercom when you get on that plane and he's like, hey, so we are heading to California. I'm gonna go ahead and look at the directions now, and we're gonna get there at some point. Cool. See you soon. You'd be like, I'm very anxious now because I don't actually know if we're gonna get there, because does he know what he's doing? It's a silly analogy, but honestly, it really is the truth. You just need to know where you're going before you set out on the trip. So in this case, we're cooking an at-home weeknight tagine. All right, so this is getting nice and hot, okay? Pan heated, added the oil. I need a spoon. I can smell the delicious orange quinoa that is overflowing a little bit. You can't see it, but it's happening. So that's something that's happening in my kitchen right now. We're gonna stick to our tagine over here. All right, we're gonna add our carrots and our onions, and we're gonna cook these until translucent. Literally just means see-through, okay? So we're gonna cook these until see-through. So here is a little cooking hack for you guys. If you would like the ingredients in your dish to be, first of all, I need to mention this first. When you put your ingredients, your first ingredients into your dish when you are sauteing, please stir them immediately, because the oil is what is actually cooking your ingredients. So if half of them are in the oil and half of them aren't, half of them are gonna start cooking and half of them aren't. So, okay. First of all. Second of all, cooking hack. If you want your ingredients to be browned, in the case of vegetables, this is caramelization. In the case of meat, this is the Maillard reaction. If you want it browned, you need, number one, space in your pan. And number two, you need to keep it uncovered, because if you cover it, then you start to steam or braise it. But if you are creating a braise like we are today and you want your ingredients to cook a little bit faster, I'm just gonna go ahead and I'm gonna mix these around, make sure they're all coated in the oil. I'm actually gonna season them because it's important to season every part of your dish, right? We want our vegetables seasoned. We want all parts of our dish seasoned. We don't just want it seasoned on top, okay? We're gonna use that pinch that we talked about when we talked about seasoning well. I'm gonna stir it one more time, and I'm gonna cover it for a couple minutes, okay? Because covering it is going to steam it a little bit. And so you are literally, what you're doing when you do that, okay, is you're producing two different cooking methods at once, okay? So there is moisture releasing from the vegetables. So it's cooking in the oil underneath. There's moisture releasing from the vegetables, and that is coming down and steaming the vegetables from the top, okay? So you're cooking from the bottom and also cooking from the top, hence in the instance of an actual tagine, and that is what is going to make it cook a little bit faster, okay? And that's also why any sort of like tagines and braises are just so delicious, because especially if you take the meat, if you're using a meat and you brown it to start, and then you add a little bit of liquid and you cover it, you've got the flavor from browning the meat, and then you are also, when you are using that moist heat cooking method, it helps to keep some of that moisture in. And it also helps the flavors to infuse really well too when it's covered. So I'm just gonna cover this for a minute, and I haven't checked to see if there are any questions. But if anyone has any questions while I'm just waiting for this to cook for a sec, you are welcome to ask. Let me see. So while this is just cooking for a couple minutes, because we're cooking on the spot here, you guys, I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna toast my almonds. So when you are toasting nuts of any sort, first of all, same deal with cooking anything. You want them to all be about the same size. These are literally just what I got from the grocery store today. They're untoasted, slivered almonds. You could use sliced almonds too. You want them all to be about the same size, so chop them to the same size if they're not pre-chopped. We went the easy way. I'm going to add them to a cold pan, and I'm going to toast them just until they start to smell aromatic and start to brown on the bottom. That means we want to keep them in a single layer on the bottom, all right? And we are not going to touch them until they start to smell aromatic, okay? So we're gonna put them on and we're gonna turn it up to like a medium low. We do not want them hot. We do not want to burn the almonds. We just want to release some of those juices and some of the fat in there, right? So release a little bit of the oils is what I meant to say. Release a little bit of the oils and just brown them a little bit so that they're aromatic and they're a little bit crispier to go on top of our tagine. It's going to add and yes, you can buy pre-toasted if you want to, but I like doing it myself, and it's much less expensive because this whole big thing was like $4 versus it's always more expensive when they do it for you, right? Okay, so I'm gonna put these on the stove. And we're gonna leave them in a layer over there, and I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna check on my onions and my carrots over here. We're all done with those. Keep your workspace as clear as you can, mostly for safety, also for ease. All right, and guess what? We're basically translucent at this point. So it really is powerful to be cooking from the bottom and then also cooking from the top. All right, so now that our main veggies down on the bottom over here. Also, by the way, if you want to add extra veggies, if you want to add some celery, if you want to add some peppers, be my guest. Also, I forgot to mention, I'm adding the garlic now. I forgot to mention that I usually make this with some tomatoes. So I oftentimes will add, after the garlic, a tablespoon of tomato paste to the bottom. If you do this, it can be really helpful to deglaze with a splash of that orange juice you used, or a splash of wine if you want as well, because the tomato paste can sometimes stick to the bottom. I like adding a couple tablespoons of tomato paste. You could also add a can of tomatoes if you want. My sister's allergic to tomatoes, and I don't do great with a ton of tomatoes, so I try to find tomato-free dishes as much as I can. So this is a delicious tomato-free tagine, but you're welcome to add it if you want a little bit more of that acidity. But do note that if it does stick a little bit, totally normal, just deglaze it. And deglazing it just means when it's still hot, you add a little bit of liquid to the bottom, usually something that's got some acid to it, like a wine or a juice. And that helps to pull anything that's stuck to the bottom off before it starts to burn. And it also infuses all of that flavor of what's cooked onto the bottom into the dish. All right, so I stirred in the garlic, 10 to 15 seconds. You do not want your garlic to brown. Please don't brown your garlic. It is my cry to everyone, don't brown your garlic. Okay, now we have our beautiful spice blend. I'm just gonna mix up a little bit. Ooh, there's a big old piece of ginger right there. I just wanted to show you how pretty it was when it was all separate, but okay, we're adding a couple teaspoons. You could add it all. I'm gonna add it all. Add as much spice as you want. If you would like to take it up a notch and add a little bit more heat to it, feel free to add some red pepper flakes. And I don't have a measurement for salt because you are seasoning as you go. You guys, I forgot to chop up the dates. I gotta make that happen. I'll do that in a second. Okay, mixing the spices. We are just toasting them. I'm just turning the heat down a little tiny bit, just so that we're not burning anything. We just want them to toast. Once they've toasted, I'm adding the chickpeas because this is what is going to season the chickpeas. I am going to add a little bit of salt to the chickpeas too. But I'm just mixing it all together so that those chickpeas get really well coated with any of that oil and butter that's in the bottom of the pan, or plant-based butter, whatever you're using, as well as the spices that I just went ahead and toasted. Speaking of toasting, we're still good. I can't smell them yet, but... All right, all nice and mixed, and I'm gonna show you guys really quick because it's really beautiful. Oh, look at how good that looks already. Okay. All right, at this point, I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna add in, I still think this is a lot of cauliflower. I'm gonna add in a couple cups of cauliflower, nice and small. I'm gonna add my cauliflower in. I'm going to add my broth in. If you want this a little bit sweeter, you are welcome to add a little bit of that orange juice I mentioned that the quinoa is cooking in, or well, not the one that the quinoa is cooking in, but any leftover you might have, or a drizzle of honey. Typically, the dried fruit that's going to be in here is going to add enough sweetness, but if you do, especially if you add a little bit of heat from some red pepper flakes, you might want a little bit of sweetness at the end. But I'm going to taste it. All right, so we're adding some cauliflower in here. I'm going to season it well, and then we're going to add the broth on top. And then we're going to go ahead and add, okay, well seasoned. You can always add more. Make sure you are seasoning well, but always add more. What would you recommend for a slow cooker, Dana? Okay, so if I were to put this in the slow cooker, I would literally just add all of these ingredients. I would add all of these ingredients. I would add maybe a little bit more liquid because you're not washing it and the liquid will evaporate during the day. So I would literally just add all of these to the slow cooker and probably add an extra half of a cup to a cup of liquid, depending, enough to cover, depending on how big your cauliflower is. Because you can see over here, I'm like, that's a lot of cauliflower. That was a really, I don't think you guys could tell how big this cauliflower is as I'm holding it up. But depending on how many chickpeas you're using or how much meat you're using, just make sure it's covered in the slow cooker, but otherwise I would add all of those ingredients. And then at the end you can taste, and you could add a little bit of honey if you wanted to for sweetness. You could add those olives at the end. So I'm gonna top this with that broth I mentioned. We're gonna cover it in just a second. That was not very much broth. I'm gonna add a little bit of water. Let me see, 1 sec. I'm just gonna grab a little bit more water and I'm gonna add that to it. But add more broth if you've got it. To be perfectly honest, I did not defrost the veggie broth in my freezer like I had planned. So it is what it is with the leftover broth we've got and a little bit of water. That's okay. You are allowed to make any substitutions you need to in your kitchen. All right, I'm actually just going to, I told you guys that I forgot to chop the dates. So what I'm gonna do is I would like to get this cooking anyway. So I'm gonna add the raisins. So these are sultanas if you guys are just joining. These are golden raisins. I was gonna say yellow, but that doesn't sound very good. This is about 1/4 cup. My hand is about 1/4 cup-ish. I've got small hands. I always joke about being short, but you guys have no idea. You can't see. You can't tell. I'm very, very short. All right, I'm gonna add those, and then I'm gonna add, and proud of it. I love that I'm short. No judgments for anyone who is short or tall. We're all great. I'm gonna add a couple tablespoons over here of the herbs, and then, like I said, we're gonna leave the rest at the end. And I'm just gonna go ahead and cover this. while I chop the rest of the dates, and we're gonna add the dates in. The dates don't need too much to them because they're already nice and soft. I'm using big medjool dates, but if you are going to use a date that is, oh my gosh, what are they called? So I'm trying to remember what the other ones that are not medjool are called. If somebody knows, let me know. So I'm gonna choose the softer ones. You know what, some of these are a little bit harder. If your dates are harder, what I'm trying to say is soak them in some hot water ahead of time. If you're not gonna be cooking this for like hours on end. Because like I said, this is one of those recipes, like the longer the better. You could keep this on your stove as long as you're home. Stay safe on your stove or in your slow cooker all day long, and it's only gonna get better with time. That's the beauty of a braise. You just wanna make sure that if it's not in the slow cooker, you're checking on it to make sure that you're not losing all of your liquid, and then that would be a very sad day. When I put this in, I'm also gonna add a little tiny bit of saffron, which again is totally optional because I know that many home cooks do not just have saffron lying around in their kitchen. And I did not for a long time either. When I was in culinary school, one of my chefs, he was telling us about how amazing saffron was, and I was like, oh, we were doing Moroccan food, and he was telling me how great saffron was. The dates are very sticky, you guys, and I was like, I'm gonna go out and get some. So I went out that weekend. This is when we were living in Toronto. I went to culinary school in Toronto. And we went to the St. Lawrence market, and I picked up some saffron at this little spice shop, and I brought it to the front, and I go to buy it, and I'm just this like, little like 19-year-old chef. I'm like 19, 20, doesn't matter. I'm like this like little thing, like so excited to buy this saffron, and they're like $25, please. And of course, we were like, probably at that point, we weren't even married. We were like super young, and we're like, that's like half our grocery budget. But I felt so awkward and I didn't know what to do. So I just bought it, and I'm pretty sure my husband just like shook his head at me and was just like, oh, I still have a little bit more date. And was just like, whatever. I guess we're eating saffron this week. But the nice thing about saffron is that it adds some really beautiful flavor, and it does last forever. So if you do decide to go ahead and invest in it, it lasts forever because they're in these like little capsules. So that's my saffron story. You guys got a lot of my stories today because this is a bit of a longer dish, so it's always fun, right? All right, so I'm gonna add a little pinch of these little flour. If any of you are botanists and you know what part of the flour this is, I can picture it in my head, but I don't know what you would call it. I'm literally just gonna take about that much and put the rest back in this special little capsule. And we're just gonna crumble it, and we're gonna add it to the top. Saffron is also really, really beautiful in Persian food as well. So I'm just gonna mix this all up. We're gonna cover it, and we're gonna let it simmer until the cauliflower is soft, at least, or forever. However long you have for it to sit in there. I'm gonna add a little bit more liquid because, like I said, I'm actually gonna add, I have this like tiny little bit of orange juice left, so I'm just gonna add a little bit of that, a little bit more liquid to it because I do want it to be in a little bit of a sauce. If you ever add too much liquid to something like a stew or a braise, what is beautiful about a stew or a braise is you can just open the pot and just simmer off whatever liquid that you need to simmer off. Please don't ever take the liquid out of it because then you're taking the flavor out of it too. That would be sad. All right, I'm just gonna taste this really briefly before I cover it up because the cauliflower is not totally cooked yet, but it is starting to cook, and that is why it is really beneficial to cut them in nice small pieces. And at this point, if you do like olives, is the point where you can decide if you would like to add those olives in. So good. It's hot. If you do want to add the olives in. I definitely over toasted my almonds, you guys. As I told you to smell the aroma and don't over toast the almonds. I never promise perfection here. I never promise it. It is what it is. Well, I will toast some after, and they will be on top, and they will be beautiful. Sometimes at this point, with my life as a busy mom, sometimes I wonder how I got things done when I was a personal chef and how I cooked people's like 2 weeks worth of food in like 8 hours. And I just got into that kitchen. I had a crazy meticulous plan. It was like, you know, mise en place like crazy. I would go shopping in the morning. I would mise en place like crazy. I would get everything done. And then I would just cook. And I would put things in the slow cooker and the pressure cooker, and I would just get things going, and I was all over the place, and it was just me in the kitchen doing all the things, and my brain was on fire. And now I'm like, where did that on fire brain go? Have any other moms found the on fire brain that they might have had pre-children? Because I don't know. I don't think it's ever coming back, but that's okay because sometimes I burn the almonds, but I've got a really delicious tagine and it was only a handful of almonds. I can always toast them again. Let me see. Anything else I want to share with you guys? Yes. Okay. So season to taste. Once the cauliflower is nice and soft, I'm going to add some olives because I like them. I'm sharing this with my parents and I think they like olives too, but they don't get a choice tonight. I'm just kidding. You can always take the olives out if you don't want them. And if you would like to add a little bit of that honey for sweetness, I added that little bit of orange juice. I do typically like to add a little bit of honey. When you taste it, you will understand why that little bit of honey at the end goes really great. And especially with the briny olives, you guys. And right at the very end, we're gonna stir in. You could also top it with some of this as well, but we're gonna stir in the other couple of tablespoons of the herbs because they're so good. All right, I'm speeding things up here a bit. Hopefully at home, if you're making this at home, you're going and doing all of the other things while you're waiting for this to cook. But it is coming along really, really well over here. Super beautiful. I'm gonna add a few olives to it and then taste it one more time because we don't want to add any extra salt if the olives are adding some of that brininess as well. Because again, we want our food, I say again, like as if you guys are here every single week. If you are, thank you. I appreciate it and I love cooking with you guys. But I always say you want your food to be well seasoned, not salty, okay? Nobody wants salty food. You want your food to be well seasoned. So I am just taking these mostly out of the liquid and I'm adding about 1/4 to 1/3 of a cup of olives. And I just add the whole olives in because then it's easier for people who don't love olives to take them out if they want to. I'm an olive lover, but I know people have opinions about olives like they do mushrooms. I feel like everyone's either like on one side or the other of the olives or the mushrooms. Thankfully, my kids like both of them, which I very much appreciate. All right. I'm gonna go ahead and cover it for 1 more minute and then we're gonna taste it together. I'm gonna go ahead and look at the orange quinoa over here. Still here. Okay, the orange quinoa looks great. It just had a little bit of a slight overflow situation, but it's fine. You guys, if you don't know, my parents are very gracious to let me use their kitchen on Thursday afternoons. I pay them back with food. But sometimes I wonder when my mom comes down the stairs after, and I always clean up after myself. She does help sometimes. She's amazing. But she's like, this child has been out of the house for 12, almost 13 years, and I'm still coming in and making a mess of her kitchen. So good. All right, let's put this in a bowl. All right, I love serving this, like I said, with the orange quinoa. Yes, it does make the quinoa a little bit sticky. If you want it less sticky, then just use more water and less orange juice. It won't be as sweet. You could always use just a little bit of orange juice and a little bit of honey, but it does taste really lovely with the orange juice, especially with this tagine. So we just have a bed of the orange quinoa on the bottom over here. I need to not burn myself. I don't need to end up like the almonds. All right, this looks delicious. We'll do one final taste and then we'll go ahead and put it in. So when you taste, a couple things, because I don't think I've talked about tasting before. First of all, you want a little bit of everything in the bite, as much as you can, so that you're actually tasting it all together. These things are actually important, okay? Second thing is that you want to let it cool down for a second, because your taste buds react to flavors differently when they are cooler versus when they're hot. It's not going to be as potent when it's hot, especially salt. So if it's really salty, but you're tasting it when it's really hot, then you might not notice. So let it cool down for a second. I wish there were smell-o-vision. I wish you guys could taste this. Will you please go home and try this? Or go home. Most of us are home. Would you please try this? It is so good, you guys. So good. So I didn't mention this at the beginning, but many of you have noticed that a lot of these recipes that I use in these Cook with Kris videos are not recipes that are on my blog. Now, some of them are making their way to the blog, but most of these recipes are from my chef archive from when I was a personal chef and when I used to cater, and this is one of them. You cannot find this recipe anywhere on the internet. In fact, actually, this recipe, I had to pull this recipe from an ebook / cookbook that I created on eating gluten-free in 2011. So I got out my old cookbook and I just made a couple modifications to it because I'd made a tomato-free version before. And that was where this original recipe came from, was from my crash course to gluten-free living in 2011. Those were the days. I was dealing with a really bad IBS flare-up, and I had never even heard of going, actually that's not true, I had heard of going gluten-free, but I had certainly never gone gluten-free, so I ended up going on this whole journey of going gluten-free and experimenting with the best like gluten-free flour and baking and cooking, and I turned it into an ebook that I sold for a couple of years, but it's long gone now. You definitely can't find it anymore. So a lot of these recipes are special to you guys who are here watching, and or in my stories afterwards. So some of them are going to make it to the blog, but some of them are just ones I like to share over here. All right, so I just added a few herbs on top. Let me see if I can go salvage a couple of those almonds. Okay, they're only half over toasted. It's fine. Gonna add a few almonds on top. Oh my gosh, you guys. How delicious does that look? I don't know if it's gonna focus. So, so good. All right, you guys, I hope you loved this recipe. It was definitely a longer one today, so thank you guys so much for those of you who stayed on with me. I need to add more liquid to this. This thing is still piping hot over here. But I hope you guys all have a beautiful rest of your day. Thank you for being here with me, whether you're watching with me live or you're watching the replay, which hopefully I'll be able to put up in just a minute. So you guys can watch this later. Don't forget to check my stories. I will put the recipe up there. Again, you know, modify it as you see fit. Definitely try it in the slow cooker if you'd like to try it in the slow cooker. Try it with the orange quinoa. Try it with some flatbread. Do it in a way that feels good to you, but enjoy it. It is one of my favorite recipes. It is so delicious. And if I wasn't talking and doing my mise en place, it does come together in about 30 minutes. So another great weeknight recipe. So next week we're gonna be back, and you guys, 100% of you, a lot of you wanted a lot of, as in everyone who answered me when I asked my stories a couple weeks ago, said you wanna learn how to make classic pad thai. So we are doing Thai cooking next week. We are going to make a classic pad thai here with Cook with Kris on Thursday at 2 o'clock Eastern. The week after, we are going to make a shawarma style chicken, and we're gonna make these really delicious Greek style shawarma pitas. And what's the last week? Oh, we're gonna do a spring risotto because we're gonna celebrate spring. It's spring at the end of the month. So that's what we're making this month. I hope you guys will join me next week as well. And thank you guys again for being here. I hope you enjoy this and have a great rest of your Thursday.